I used to think the moment that destroyed my family was the day I found a hidden camera in my bedroom. For a long time, that's the story I told myself. It was easier that way. It gave me a single moment to blame, a single object, a single monster. But that's not what really happened. The truth is, my family had been falling apart long before I ever noticed that little black lens staring back at me. I just hadn't been looking in the right direction. And when I finally did, I realized the camera wasn't recording the beginning of my nightmare. It was recording the end of my innocence. My name is Katie. I'm 21 years old, and until that weekend, I believed I understood the people I called my family. I was wrong. The strange part is that nothing felt unusual that Friday morning. If anything, it felt almost peaceful. My mom was rushing around the kitchen trying to remember everything they'd forgotten to pack for their camping trip. My little brothers were running through the house carrying sleeping bags that looked twice their size, arguing over who got the top bunk in the camper. My stepdad stood in the driveway loading coolers into the truck like he always did whenever we went somewhere. Watching him, no one would have guessed what kind of man he really was, least of all me. He'd been in my life since I was 8 years old. 13 years. That's a long time to teach a child that someone is family. Long enough that you stop calling them your stepdad in your head. They're just dad. Our relationship had never been perfect. We argued, a lot, mostly about stupid things. He thought I stayed out too late. He didn't like my boyfriend. He complained that I spent too much time at work and not enough helping around the house. Normal family arguments. At least, that's what I convinced myself they were. Looking back now, there were moments that don't sit right anymore. Comments I'd laughed off, looks I'd ignored. Little things that seemed harmless until every memory was forced into a completely different shape. Funny how your brain protects you. It edits reality just enough for you to survive it. Back then, I still believed every uncomfortable feeling had an innocent explanation. I had no idea how dangerous that belief could be. "I wish you could come with us," my mom said while stuffing paper towels into one of the bags. "I have a shift tomorrow," I reminded her. "I know," she smiled. "At least you'll have the whole house to yourself." That sounded like heaven. I'd been working almost non-stop that summer, saving money, trying to figure out what adulthood was supposed to look like. House-sitting for one weekend sounded easy. Feed the dogs, feed the chickens, water the garden, make sure the place didn't burn down. Simple. My stepdad walked inside carrying one last toolbox. "I moved one of the backyard cameras yesterday," he said casually. "You'll probably notice it outside your bedroom window." I looked up. "Oh? We're getting too many raccoons around the chicken coop," he shrugged. "Better angle from there." That made perfect sense. He'd installed several new security cameras around the property a few weeks earlier. He'd spent an entire Saturday talking about blind spots and motion sensors and Wi-Fi coverage. Honestly, I barely listened. Technology wasn't really my thing. If he wanted another camera outside, why would I question it? I didn't. Not for even a second. Looking back now, I wish I had. Before they left, my mom hugged me. "Call if anything happens." "I will." My little brothers waved dramatically through the truck windows as if they were leaving for 6 months instead of 2 days. My stepdad rolled down his window. "Oh," he smiled. "If your boyfriend wants to stay over so you're not alone." I blinked. "That's fine." For a second, I just stared at him. Did I hear that correctly? Normally, he hated the idea. He'd made it very clear more than once that he didn't want my boyfriend sleeping over while they were gone. His exact words had always been something like, "I don't need teenagers fooling around in my house." Even though we were adults, even though I was 21, even though I'd been dating the same man for years. So hearing him suddenly change his mind felt unexpected, but not suspicious, just unexpected. Maybe he was finally starting to trust me. Maybe we'd turned some invisible corner in our relationship. It's amazing how desperately we search for evidence that people are becoming better, even when the evidence isn't really there. The truck disappeared down the road. The house became quiet. Really quiet. For the first time in weeks, I had an entire evening to myself. I fed the animals, started a load of laundry, ordered takeout, watched half a terrible movie before giving up. Around 8, my boyfriend texted, "Still alive?" "Barely. The chickens are judging me." "Need backup?" I smiled. "Always." An hour later, he showed up carrying milkshakes. He'd always had this incredible ability to make any room feel lighter just by walking into it. We talked, watched another movie, laughed about work, about my brothers, about absolutely nothing important. It felt normal, comfortable, safe. If someone had told me that my entire life was about to split into a before and after, I would have laughed. Because that's the thing about life-changing moments. They almost never announce themselves. They hide inside completely ordinary evenings. It was close to midnight when everything changed. We were getting ready for bed. I was plugging my phone into the wall when my boyfriend suddenly frowned. "Hey," I looked over. "What?" He walked toward the window. "That's weird." "What is?" He pointed toward the cable coming through the slightly open edge of the window frame. "I thought you said the security camera was outside." "It is." "So," he followed the wire with his eyes, "why does it come inside your room?" I felt a tiny knot form in my stomach. "It probably just powers the outside camera." "Maybe." He crouched beside the outlet. Then he reached down and picked up what looked like an ordinary black power adapter. At least, that's what I thought it was. He turned it over in his hand. His expression changed, slowly. The color drained from his face. "Katie," his voice was almost a whisper, "I don't think this is a power adapter." I laughed nervously. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he held it out for me to see. There, a tiny pinhole, almost invisible, a small slot for a memory card, and a blinking light I hadn't noticed before. I stared at it. My mind refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. "No," I whispered, "that can't be right." I took it from his hands, turned it over, looked again, then again. There had to be another explanation. There had to be. Because if there wasn't, then someone hadn't just put a camera outside my bedroom. Someone had put one inside it, and it was pointing directly at the place where I had believed I was safest. Part 2. I wish I could tell you that I immediately knew what I was looking at, that some instinct kicked in, that I grabbed my phone, called the police, and never looked back. But that's not what happened. Trauma doesn't usually begin with certainty. It begins with denial, with your brain desperately searching for any explanation that feels less terrifying than the truth. I remember staring at that little black cube in my hands. It barely weighed anything. It looked cheap, ordinary, like something you'd buy online for $20 and forget about a week later. There was no way that this tiny piece of plastic could be responsible for the sick feeling crawling up my spine. "There has to be another explanation," I whispered. My boyfriend didn't answer. He was already searching the model number on his phone. The room suddenly felt different, smaller, quieter, like all the air had been pulled out of it. I watched him scroll. His face tightened with every second. Then he slowly looked up. "Katie," he hesitated, "I think it's exactly what we think it is." "No." "It says it's disguised as a phone charger." "No." "It records video onto an SD card." "No." "It can also live stream." "No." Each answer came out louder than the last, not because I didn't hear him, because I couldn't allow myself to believe him. People always imagine that discovering something horrifying feels dramatic. It doesn't. It feels stupid. Your brain argues with reality over the smallest details. Maybe the website is wrong. Maybe it's a different model. Maybe someone switched the parts. Maybe he accidentally bought the wrong charger. Maybe. Those little lies become life rafts. You cling to them because the truth feels impossible. I sat down on the edge of my bed. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, my boyfriend broke the silence. "Can I see it again?" I handed him the device. He turned it over carefully before pressing against one side with his thumbnail. A tiny compartment clicked open. Inside was a micro SD card. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. I remember hearing the refrigerator downstairs humming, a dog barking somewhere outside, a motorcycle passing on the road. It's strange what your brain chooses to remember. The important moments almost disappear. The ordinary sounds stay forever. My boyfriend slowly removed the card. He looked at me. "I think we should see what's on it." My stomach turned. "No. If there's nothing, I don't want to know." He looked confused. "Katie, I don't want to know." Because somewhere deep inside, I already did. I knew that if there were videos on that card, there would be no going back, no misunderstanding, no innocent explanation, no version of my life where everything returned to normal. I wasn't ready to lose my family, not yet. He sat beside me. "I'm not going to do anything you don't want." I nodded. "I know." We stayed there in silence. The charger sat between us on the bed like it belonged to someone else. Finally, I asked the question that had been circling my mind ever since he'd picked it up. "Do you think—" I couldn't finish. He already knew. "Do I think your stepdad put it there?" I nodded. He didn't answer immediately. "I don't know." It was a kind answer, kinder than the truth, because accusing someone's parent, even a step-parent, isn't something decent people do lightly. "I mean," he continued carefully, "who else had access to your room?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. "No one. Not really. Friends didn't come over often. My brothers were too young to buy something like this. My mom barely knew how to use Bluetooth, which left—" I stood up so quickly the bed creaked. "No." "What?" "He wouldn't. Katie. He raised me." "I know. He taught me how to ride a bike." "I know. He came to every school play." "I know. He cried at my high school graduation." "I know. So why would he—" The sentence collapsed before I could finish it. My boyfriend walked over and gently held my shoulders. "You don't have to figure everything out tonight." But my brain had already started doing something terrifying. It was reopening old memories, little moments, tiny things I'd buried years ago because they seemed too insignificant to matter. A joke about locking my bedroom door, a comment about how quickly I was growing up, the way he'd sometimes knock and then open the door before I answered. At the time, I'd told myself he was just forgetful. Now, every memory came back wearing a different face. I wrapped my arms around myself. "I feel sick." He nodded. "I know." "No," I whispered. "I actually feel sick." I ran to the bathroom before I could stop myself. Afterward, I splashed cold water on my face. The girl looking back at me in the mirror didn't seem familiar. She looked frightened, but underneath the fear, there was something worse. Shame. Not because I'd done anything wrong, because I suddenly wondered, had someone been watching me for days, weeks, months? How many times had I changed clothes in this room? How many nights had I walked around after a shower without thinking? How many private conversations had I had? How many moments had never actually been private? I slid down against the bathroom wall and cried. Not loudly, just enough that it hurt to breathe. My boyfriend found me a few minutes later. He sat on the floor beside me, didn't try to fix anything, didn't tell me it would be okay. Sometimes the kindest thing someone can do is stop pretending they have answers. After a while, he quietly asked, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." "We have options." I laughed bitterly. "No." "We really don't," he frowned. "We can call your mom." I closed my eyes. My mom. The thought should have made me feel safe. Instead, I felt terrified, because if I called her tonight, she'd still be 4 hours away, alone with him. If he really had done this, what would happen after she confronted him? Would he deny it? Destroy evidence? Get angry? Would my little brothers be there? For the first time that night, I wasn't just scared for myself. I was scared for everyone else in that house. And a thought entered my mind that would haunt me for years. If he did this to me, what if I wasn't the only one? He didn't need to finish the sentence. I already knew. There was only one reason, and for the first time, I stopped trying to convince myself otherwise. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't misunderstanding. Someone had deliberately placed a hidden camera inside my bedroom. Someone I had trusted for more than half my life. I suddenly felt angry, not scared, not confused, angry. Angry that I'd spent hours trying to defend him. Angry that I'd been searching for innocent explanations. Angry that I'd been questioning my own instincts instead of his actions. My uncle quietly walked over. "You need to report this." "I know. Today." I nodded. "But before we leave..." I looked around my bedroom one last time. Every photo on the wall, every book, every birthday card, every stuffed animal I'd never gotten rid of. This room had watched me grow up, or at least, that's what I used to believe. Now I realized someone else had been watching too, and that thought was almost impossible to survive. Before I tell you what happened at the police station, I want to ask you something. If you had found what I found, would you have opened the SD card first, or would you have handed it straight to the police without ever looking? I thought I already knew my answer, but in the next few hours, everything I believed was about to change. The police station was only 15 minutes away. It felt like 2 hours. No one talked much during the drive. My aunt kept one hand on mine. My boyfriend drove. I stared out the window, watching familiar streets pass by like I'd never seen them before. I kept thinking about one question. Not whether my stepdad had done it. That question was slowly disappearing. The one that wouldn't leave me alone was different. How long? A week? A month? A year? Every answer was worse than the last. By the time we pulled into the parking lot, I felt numb. "I can go in with you," my boyfriend said. I nodded. "I don't think I can do this alone." The officer at the front desk couldn't have been much older than 30. He smiled politely. "What can I help you with today?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. How do you explain something like this? How do you say those words out loud for the first time? My boyfriend quietly slid the black charger onto the counter. "We need to report a hidden camera." The officer's expression changed instantly. The smile disappeared. He picked up the device carefully without touching the lens. "Where was this found?" "My bedroom." "Who found it?" "My boyfriend did." "And whose house?" "My mother's." He looked back at me. "Do you know who installed it?" The room became painfully quiet. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him I wasn't sure, because saying my stepdad's name somehow made everything real. My voice cracked. "I think my stepdad did." The officer didn't react. No surprise, no disbelief, just calm professionalism. "I'm going to ask you a few questions." For the next 40 minutes, I told a complete stranger things I hadn't even admitted to myself. When was the camera installed? Who lived in the house? Who had access to my room? Had anyone else seen it? Did I believe I had been recorded? Did I know whether images had been shared? Every question peeled away another layer of denial. Finally, he held up the SD card. "Did you view its contents?" "No." He nodded slowly. "That was the right decision." Something about those words made my chest tighten. The right decision. Until then, I'd wondered if I was weak. Maybe I should have looked. Maybe I should have known exactly what was on it. But hearing an officer tell me I'd done the right thing felt like someone had finally stopped me from blaming myself. He placed both the charger and the memory card into evidence bags. "We'll submit these immediately." "What happens now?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair. "This is considered a very serious allegation." The word allegation bothered me. It sounded uncertain, small, like something that could still disappear. Seeing the expression on my face, he softened his voice. "If what you've described is accurate, this could become a criminal investigation." Criminal investigation. The words echoed in my head. Until that moment, everything had still felt like a family problem, a terrible family problem. Now someone was telling me it wasn't just that. It was potentially a crime, a real one with detectives, evidence, search warrants, courtrooms. I suddenly realized my life would never go back to what it had been 2 days earlier. The officer continued, "You'll most likely hear from an investigator early next week." I nodded. "What about," I hesitated, "my little brothers?" He looked at me carefully. "How old are they?" 5 and 9. He made another note. If investigators believe there could be additional victims, they'll expand the investigation. The room spun again. Additional victims. Hearing someone else say those words out loud made them impossible to ignore. Until then, they'd only existed as a terrible thought inside my own head. Now they were written on paper, officially, legally. I felt sick all over again. The officer noticed. "Would you like some water?" I nodded. While he stepped away, my boyfriend squeezed my hand. "You did it." I looked at him. "No, this is just the beginning." He didn't argue, because we both knew I was right. When the officer returned, he handed me a small card. "This is your report number." I stared at it, a random string of letters and numbers. It looked so ordinary. Funny how life-changing moments often come wrapped in ordinary things. A business card, a wedding invitation, a hospital bracelet, a police report number. Sometimes your entire future fits on a piece of paper. Before we left, I asked one final question. What if... I stopped. What if it's all a misunderstanding? The officer looked at me for several seconds before answering. "I've been doing this job a long time." He chose his words carefully. "I've never seen someone accidentally install a hidden camera disguised as a charger inside another person's bedroom." Silence. That was the moment. Not finding the camera, not walking into the station, not filing the report. That sentence. It was the last excuse I had left, and it was gone. Outside, the afternoon sun was almost blinding. People walked past us laughing. A father held his little daughter's hand as they crossed the street. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I wondered what it felt like to trust your father completely, to never question whether your bedroom was truly yours, to never second-guess your childhood memories. I realized something then. Even if the investigation ended tomorrow, even if every piece of evidence disappeared, even if somehow nothing ever came of it, the person I had been before this weekend was already gone. As we reached the car, my phone vibrated. It was my mom. "Everything okay? How are the animals?" I stared at the message for what felt like forever. She had no idea. She was still 4 hours away, still sitting beside the man I had just reported to the police. I typed 3 different replies, deleted all of them, because how do you answer a question like that? How do you tell your mother that by the time she gets home, nothing about your family will ever be the same? Before I tell you what I decided, I want to ask you something. If you were in my place, would you tell your mother everything immediately over the phone, or would you wait until you could look her in the eyes? I believed seeing the evidence would make the truth impossible to deny. I had no idea how badly I was about to underestimate the power of denial. I never answered my mom's text, not because I wanted to ignore her, because every response I wrote felt like a lie. "Everything's fine." It wasn't. "We need to talk." "Too dangerous." "Call me." What if he answered? I slipped my phone back into my pocket. "I'll tell her in person," I said quietly. My aunt nodded. "I think that's the safest choice." My boyfriend looked less certain. What if he gets to her first? Those words stayed with me the entire drive home. I didn't want to believe that was possible. I still thought the evidence would speak for itself. I still believed the truth had a kind of power that lies didn't. I would learn very soon how wrong I was. The next 2 days felt longer than the previous 21 years of my life. I didn't go back to my house. I stayed with my aunt and uncle instead. They gave me their guest room. My aunt made tea I barely touched. My uncle kept finding small reasons to check on me without asking how I was doing. Looking back, I think they already knew there were no comforting words left. Every few hours my phone buzzed. Friends, coworkers, my mom, my brothers sending me pictures of fish they'd caught while camping. Every photo hurt. There was my little brother grinning with a marshmallow. There was my mom smiling beside the lake. And there, standing behind them with one arm around my mother's shoulders, was my stepdad, smiling, looking exactly like the man everyone believed he was. I stared at those pictures for a long time. Then I remembered something, the smile. He always smiled in family photos, every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation. How many of those smiles had I trusted? How many memories had I built around a version of him that never actually existed? I hated that my own mind kept rewriting my childhood. One terrible discovery had somehow infected 13 years of memories. Late Sunday afternoon, my cousin came over. She was a civil lawyer, not a criminal attorney, but she understood something I didn't: people. After listening quietly to everything that had happened, she asked one question: "When are they coming home?" "Around 6, she nodded. "You cannot confront him first." "I wasn't planning to." "Good." She leaned forward. "You need your mother away from him." "Why?" "Because if he's manipulative," she stopped herself, "he'll control the conversation." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He'll deny everything." "I have evidence." "He'll explain the evidence." "He can't." "You'd be surprised." I didn't like the confidence in her voice. She'd seen things I hadn't. She continued, "If your mom hears his version before yours, you'll spend the entire conversation trying to catch up." That sentence terrified me. Until then, I'd been planning exactly what I wanted to say. Now I realized timing mattered just as much as truth. So we made a plan. My mom would meet me somewhere public, just her, no stepdad. My aunt would come with me. I'd explain everything calmly, show her the photographs, tell her about the police report, tell her about the SD card, tell her everything. Then, together, we'd decide what to do next. At least, that was the plan. I remember rehearsing the conversation in my head over and over. "Mom, I need you to listen before you say anything." "No." "Mom, something terrible happened." "No." "Mom, I found something in my room." Still wrong. Every version sounded impossible. Because no daughter ever imagines she'll have to tell her mother something like this, especially about the man she'd loved for 13 years. As evening got closer, my anxiety became almost unbearable. I walked circles around my aunt's backyard. My boyfriend finally stopped me. "You've been doing that for 20 minutes." "I know." "What are you thinking about?" I laughed softly. "Everything." Then, after a long silence, "I keep hoping she'll hug me." He looked at me. "What?" "When I tell her," I swallowed, "I hope she just hugs me." Not because I needed comfort, because a hug would have answered every question. It would have meant, "I believe you." No investigation, no evidence, no explanations, just belief. I didn't realize then how desperately I was clinging to that hope. Around 5:30, my phone rang. It was my mom. I froze. "Answer it," my aunt said gently. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Hi, sweetheart." She sounded happy, completely normal. "We're about 40 minutes away." My throat tightened. "Okay. Everything all right?" "Yeah. You sound tired." "I didn't sleep much." She laughed. "I bet you've been staying up late with your boyfriend." For just a second, I couldn't breathe. If only she knew. If only she knew why he had actually been there. She kept talking. "The boys can't wait to tell you about the trip." "Mm-hmm. And your stepdad caught the biggest fish." There it was, his name. Hearing it made my stomach turn. "You still there?" "Yeah." "I was wondering if you could help unload the truck when we get home." I closed my eyes. "We're not going home." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "I need to talk to you." "About what?" "In person." Another pause. "Is everything okay?" I looked at my aunt, then at my boyfriend. Finally, I whispered, "No." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had disconnected. Finally, she spoke. "You've got me worried." "I know." "Can you at least tell me what this is about?" I almost did. I almost told her everything right then. But my cousin's words echoed in my head. "You need your mother away from him." "I'll explain when I see you," she sighed. "All right. I love you." My heart broke hearing those words, because I still believed them. "I love you too." When the call ended, I stared at the black screen. Something felt wrong, not with the conversation, with the timing. A feeling I couldn't explain settled into my chest. It was small, almost impossible to notice, but it wouldn't leave. My boyfriend saw my expression. "What is it?" "I don't know." "You look scared." I nodded slowly. "I am." "Because you're about to tell your mom?" I looked toward the road outside my aunt's house. "No," I whispered. "I'm scared that somehow he already knows." Before I tell you what happened when my mother finally arrived, I want to ask you something. If someone you loved showed you undeniable evidence against your spouse, would you believe them immediately? Or do you think your first instinct would be to defend the person you've built your life with? I thought I knew exactly how my mother would respond. That illusion lasted less than 10 minutes. My mom arrived alone. At least, that's what I saw at first. She parked across the street from the small coffee shop my aunt had chosen. It wasn't crowded, but it wasn't empty either. Just enough people around that no one would raise their voice. She climbed out of the SUV wearing the same sweatshirt she'd left home in 2 days earlier. For one impossible second, everything felt normal again. She smiled when she saw me. Then she noticed my face. The smile disappeared. She hurried toward me. "Katie, what happened?" This was it. The moment I'd been rehearsing for 2 days. Every speech I'd practiced vanished from my mind. Instead, I stepped forward and hugged her. I held on tighter than I had in years. She immediately wrapped her arms around me. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice was soft. "What happened?" I almost broke right there, because for just a few seconds, I felt safe again, like I was 10 years old, like my mom could still fix anything. When we finally sat down inside, my aunt took the chair beside me but stayed quiet. This wasn't her conversation. It was ours. My mom looked from me to my aunt, then back to me. "You're scaring me." I took a deep breath. "I need you to promise me something." She frowned. "What?" "Please. Don't interrupt until I'm finished." She looked confused. "Okay. And please don't call anyone. Katie, promise me." She hesitated. "I promise." I reached into my bag. The first thing I placed on the table wasn't the hidden camera. It was the police report. She looked down at it, then back at me. "What is this?" "I filed a police report yesterday." Her eyebrows pulled together. "For what?" I slowly placed the black charger beside the paperwork. She looked at it without recognizing it. "It's a charger." "No, it isn't." She picked it up, turned it over once, then twice. "I don't understand." "It has a camera inside." She stopped moving. "What?" "It's a hidden camera." She laughed, actually laughed, not because she thought it was funny, because her brain rejected what she'd just heard. "No." She shook her head. "No, it isn't." "It is." "Who told you that?" "The police." She looked back at the device, then at me, then at my aunt. Nobody spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Where did you find it?" "My bedroom." Silence. "Where exactly?" "Plugged into the outlet beside my window." She stared at me. Then she shook her head again. "There has to be some mistake." There it was, the very first stage, denial, exactly the way my cousin said it would happen. I reached into my folder and slid several printed photographs across the table, pictures my boyfriend had taken before we'd removed the device. The cable, the window, the angle, everything. She picked them up slowly. I watched her eyes move from one image to another. She looked confused, then concerned, then pale. Finally, she whispered, "Who put it there?" I answered without hesitation, "I believe your husband did." The photograph slipped from her hands. "No." "He installed the outdoor security camera the day before." "No." "The cable came through my window." "No." "The hidden camera was connected to it." She pushed the pictures away. "No." People always imagine denial looks dramatic. It doesn't. Sometimes it's just one word, repeated over and over until reality goes away. "No. No. No." My aunt quietly spoke for the first time. "Linda." My mom turned toward her. "You knew about this?" "I know what Katie found." "You believed her?" "I saw the evidence." My mother's breathing became shallow. She looked back at me. "Sweetheart, Why didn't you call me? The question caught me completely off guard. I tried. No, you didn't. I couldn't while you were alone with him. Why? Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? I stared at her. Mom, I had just found a hidden camera in my bedroom. I didn't know that. I know. Then why would you assume? She stopped herself. The sentence never finished, because halfway through saying it, she realized what she was defending. Her husband, not me. For the first time since we'd sat down, I saw tears fill her eyes. I don't understand. I know. He wouldn't. She stopped again. I leaned forward. Mom. She looked up. I need you to answer one question. She nodded slowly. If this had happened to someone else's daughter, if your best friend told you this story, if Aunt Karen came to you with these photographs, would you believe her? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I watched the conflict happen in real time. A mother, a wife, both fighting for control. Finally, she whispered, I don't know. That answer hurt more than I expected, because I had spent 2 days believing there was only one possible response. I believe you. Instead, I got uncertainty, confusion, doubt. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I love you. I know. I would never choose anyone over you. Something inside me cracked, not because she was lying, because she believed it. She genuinely thought she was protecting both of us. She still believed there was a version of reality where no choice had to be made. I wanted to believe that too. Then her phone rang. The screen lit up on the table between us. Mark, my stepdad. All three of us stared at his name. It kept ringing. My mom looked at me. What do I do? Before I could answer, the ringing stopped. 5 seconds later, another call. Mark. Then another. My aunt quietly whispered, Don't answer. My mom didn't. Instead, she silenced the phone. Almost immediately, a text message appeared. Where are you? Then another. Why aren't you answering? Then another. Who are you with? I felt the blood drain from my face. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. My mom looked genuinely frightened now. How does he know I'm not at the grocery store? Nobody answered, because we were all thinking the same thing. He wasn't guessing. He was tracking the situation, watching it unfold, trying to regain control before he lost it. Before I tell you what happened when my mother finally confronted him, I need to ask you something. At this point in the story, do you think my mom still believed me, or do you think she was already looking for a reason to believe him instead? Because what happened over the next hour changed not only the way I saw my stepfather, but the way I would see my mother for the rest of my life. My mom didn't answer his calls. For the next 30 seconds, neither of us said a word. We just watched her phone light up again and again and again. It wasn't normal, not for a husband who thought his wife had simply stopped at the grocery store. Finally, the calls stopped. The silence that followed somehow felt even worse. My mom slowly turned the phone face down. I've never seen him like this. I looked at her. You mean you've never noticed? She flinched. Not because I'd raised my voice, I hadn't, but because, for the first time that afternoon, I wasn't protecting her feelings anymore. She looked exhausted. I need to hear his side. The words landed like a punch. I stared at her. My side? No. She reached for my hand. Please, don't misunderstand me. I'm trying not to. She closed her eyes. I've lived with him for 13 years. I know. He helped raise you. I know. I need to understand how something like this could happen. I slowly pulled my hand away. Mom, what explanation would make this okay? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. There isn't one. I know. So why are you looking for one? She looked down at the photographs again. Her fingers trembled as she picked one up. I don't know. And for the first time, I believed her. She truly didn't know. She wasn't trying to betray me. She was trying to save the life she'd spent 13 years building. The problem was, saving that life meant risking mine. Another text appeared. Please answer. You're scaring me. Then another. Katie isn't with you, is she? My heart stopped. He knew. Somehow, he already knew. My aunt quietly leaned closer. Has he ever texted you like this before? My mom shook her head. Never. She looked genuinely frightened now. Not frightened of me, frightened of what all this meant. Then another message appeared. I can explain. I felt every hair on my arm stand up. Explain? He hadn't even been accused yet. Nobody had contacted him. The police hadn't called. No one from my family had spoken to him. So, what exactly did he think he needed to explain? I pointed at the screen. Mom. She looked down. I watched the realization spread across her face, slowly, painfully, like someone turning on a light in a room she'd avoided entering. She whispered, I don't understand. He does. What? He already knows why we're meeting. She looked back at the phone. He shouldn't. No, he shouldn't. For the first time all afternoon, I saw certainty replacing confusion. Not certainty that he was guilty, certainty that something was terribly wrong. Then her phone rang again. This time, it wasn't him. It was my little brother. She answered immediately. Hi, sweetheart. His little voice came through the speaker. Mom? Hi, honey. Where are you? I'm just talking with your sister. Dad's mad. Every muscle in my body tightened. What do you mean? He keeps walking around the house. My brother sounded confused. He yelled because you weren't answering. My mom looked at me. I could see panic beginning to replace denial. Then my brother said something that made all of us freeze. He went into Katie's room. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. My mom gripped the phone tighter. What did he do? I don't know. He shut the door. My boyfriend looked at me. I already knew what we were both thinking. Evidence. If there was anything left, he was looking for it. Then my brother continued. Now he's moving boxes. My aunt quietly stood up. We need to leave. My mom nodded immediately. She didn't argue. She didn't hesitate. For the first time, we were all thinking exactly the same thing. When the call ended, my mom grabbed her keys. We're going home. I stood too. So am I. She looked at me. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm coming. Katie, I've spent 2 days wondering if the man who raised me secretly recorded me. I felt my voice shaking. I'm done hiding. She stared at me for several seconds, then quietly nodded. The drive back felt nothing like the drive to the police station. This time, every mile felt like a countdown. Nobody spoke. Rain had started falling, soft at first, then heavier. The windshield wipers moved back and forth with a steady rhythm that somehow made everything more tense. I kept looking at the clock. 23 minutes, 19, 14, 10. Every minute gave him more time to delete, to hide, to destroy, or to invent a story. By the time we turned onto our road, my heart was beating so hard I could hear it. The house looked exactly as it always had. The porch light was on. The truck sat in the driveway. Everything looked peaceful, ordinary. If someone had driven past that moment, they would have seen nothing unusual. Just another family arriving home after a weekend away. Appearances are incredible liars. As soon as my mom parked, we saw the front door open. My stepdad stepped onto the porch. He smiled, actually smiled. Then he waved. There you are! His voice sounded cheerful, almost relieved. He looked exactly like the man I'd known for 13 years. The same calm face, the same relaxed posture, the same gentle smile. For one terrifying second, my brain wanted to believe him again. No, not anymore. He walked toward us. I've been worried sick. His eyes landed on me, then on my boyfriend, then my aunt. Something changed. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. The smile didn't disappear, it tightened, like a man doing complicated math in his head. He was calculating, trying to understand what we knew, trying to decide who he needed to be next. Loving husband? Concerned father? Innocent victim? I suddenly realized I had no idea which version of him had ever been real. He stopped a few feet away. His eyes met mine. Then, in the calmest voice imaginable, he said, "Katie, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. If someone had lied to you for over a decade, do you think you'd recognize the moment they started lying? Or would they sound exactly the same as they always had? Because the next conversation lasted less than 15 minutes and destroyed every remaining piece of my childhood. A misunderstanding? I repeated the words so quietly that I almost didn't recognize my own voice. My stepdad gave a slow, sympathetic nod. Exactly. He looked at my mom instead of me. I think somebody made a mistake. There it was again. Not fear, not shock, not confusion, control. Every word was calm, measured, like he'd already practiced this conversation 100 times in his head. My mom stepped between us. "Mark!" She held up the photographs. "I need you to explain these." He barely glanced at them. Then he sighed. "I was hoping we could all sit down first." "No!" My voice surprised even me. "We're not sitting down." His eyes finally met mine. For a brief moment, I saw something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not guilt, annoyance, like I'd become an inconvenience. Then it disappeared. "So," he said gently, "you've already decided I'm guilty." "I didn't decide anything." "You went to the police." "Because someone put a hidden camera in my bedroom." "I understand why that scared you." He nodded slowly. "But you're making assumptions." My aunt crossed her arms. "What assumptions?" He looked at her politely. "That the device was recording." I felt my stomach tighten. "What?" He pointed toward the photographs. "That charger was never activated." I stared at him. "It had a memory card." "So?" "It was hidden." "So?" "It was pointed at my bed." "So?" Every answer came effortlessly. Every sentence sounded reasonable, if you ignored the bigger picture. My mom looked confused again. He saw it immediately, and he leaned into it. "I ordered several smart home devices online." He shrugged. "They shipped the wrong item." I blinked. "What?" "I noticed it wasn't working. So I left it there until I had time to return it." The silence that followed was unbearable, because for just one horrible second, even I wanted to believe him. Not because his story made sense, because I wanted my old life back. He saw hesitation in my face. He smiled, softly. "I would never do anything to hurt you." There it was, the sentence I'd heard my entire childhood, after every argument, after every punishment, after every misunderstanding. "I would never hurt you." Funny how familiar words can suddenly sound completely foreign. My boyfriend finally spoke. "Then why was there an SD card inside?" My stepdad looked at him. "I have no idea." "It was installed." "I didn't install it. The police have it now." "Good." His answer came instantly. "They'll prove I didn't do anything." He wasn't panicking. He wasn't defensive. If anything, he seemed almost relieved. That frightened me more than anything else, because innocent people and manipulative people can both appear calm. The difference is why they're calm. He wasn't trusting the truth. He was trusting himself. My mom looked back and forth between us. I could almost see the battle inside her. Her daughter, her husband, two people she loved, two completely different realities. Only one of them could be true. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Mark, did you ever go into Katie's room while we were gone?" He smiled sadly. "Of course not." My heart dropped. He didn't hesitate, not even for half a second. The lie came too easily. I took one step forward. "My little brother said you were in my room today." For the first time, his expression changed. Barely, a blink, nothing more. "I was looking for the Wi-Fi router." "It isn't in my room." I realized that afterward. Another answer, ready, smooth, polished. It was like trying to catch smoke with your hands. Every time I thought I'd cornered him, he slipped away. Then my boyfriend quietly asked, "If you thought it was just a broken charger, why did you text your wife saying, 'I can explain'?" Silence. Real silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, the dangerous kind. My stepdad looked at my mom, then at the phone in her hand. He hadn't expected us to mention the messages. I meant, he paused, I could explain why Katie misunderstood. There it was. Not what happened, not the charger, not the camera, my misunderstanding. Everything was becoming my fault, slowly, piece by piece, without anyone noticing. Gaslighting doesn't usually begin with shouting. It begins with tiny shifts in reality, a changed memory, a different timeline, one carefully chosen sentence at a time. I suddenly understood why people stay trapped in abusive relationships for years. Because the lies aren't outrageous, they're just believable enough to make you doubt yourself. My mom looked exhausted. She sat down on the porch steps. I don't know what to believe. Those 7 words hurt more than anything my stepdad had said, because I had spent my entire drive hoping she'd stand beside me. Instead, she was standing in the middle. My stepdad walked toward her, very slowly, like he was approaching a frightened animal. He placed one hand on her shoulder. Honey, we've built a life together. He looked directly into her eyes. You know me. I watched my mother's face. I could almost see 13 years of memories rushing through her mind. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, hospital visits, family vacations, school concerts, 1,000 ordinary moments. How do you erase 13 years because of one terrible discovery? The answer is, you don't. Not immediately. And manipulators know that. They don't fight the evidence, they fight the memories. They make you wonder if everything good you've ever experienced could possibly have been fake. Then, they wait. Because doubt always buys them time. Suddenly, headlights turned into the driveway. Another police vehicle, followed by a second. My stepdad turned toward the road. For the first time all day, his face lost every trace of confidence. An officer stepped out, then another. One of them looked directly at my stepdad. Mark? Yes. We need to speak with you. My stepdad smiled politely. Of course. Then the officer added one sentence, and the entire atmosphere changed. Before we do, I need to advise you of your rights. The color drained from my mother's face. My stepdad didn't say another word. Before I tell you what happened after the police searched our home, I want to ask you something. Up to this moment, would you have believed his explanation, or do you think his calmness made him seem even more suspicious? Because what the investigators found inside that house was something none of us had expected. The police didn't rush. That surprised me. Movies make you believe investigations happen fast. Doors get kicked in, people get handcuffed, questions get answered. Real life isn't like that. Real life is painfully quiet. One officer stayed with my mom. Another spoke to my stepdad near the driveway. 2 investigators walked into the house carrying cameras, evidence bags, and notebooks. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody accused anyone. The silence was somehow more frightening than shouting. My stepdad stood with his hands in his pockets, calm, almost relaxed. If someone had driven past our house at that moment, they would have assumed he was talking to neighbors, not investigators, not police. I couldn't stop watching him. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He wasn't looking at my mom. His eyes followed the investigators every time they disappeared into another room. The living room, the hallway, the kitchen. Then the stairs, toward my bedroom. I saw his jaw tighten, just slightly. It was the first crack I'd seen all day. One of the investigators came back downstairs. Where is the router? My stepdad answered immediately. In the office. The office? Down the hall. The investigator nodded and disappeared again. I looked at my boyfriend. He looked back at me. Neither of us said anything, but we were thinking the same thing. That wasn't my bedroom. So why had he gone into my room earlier looking for the router? The story was already falling apart. Almost 40 minutes passed. Nobody told us anything. Waiting became its own kind of torture. I kept replaying every conversation I'd ever had with my stepdad, every birthday, every ride to school, every family dinner. It felt like someone had dumped thousands of puzzle pieces onto the floor. I couldn't tell which memories were real anymore. Did he ever actually love me? Or had I simply loved the version of him I created in my own mind? Those are two very different things. It took me years to understand that. Finally, the front door opened. One of the investigators stepped outside carrying a cardboard evidence box. Inside were several electronics, a laptop, 2 external hard drives, a tablet, a handful of memory cards. My stomach dropped. I hadn't known any of those existed. My mom looked confused. "What are those?" The investigator answered carefully. "Items we'll need to examine." My stepdad finally spoke. "Those are for work." The investigator simply nodded. "We'll document everything. No argument, no accusation, just procedure." Somehow, that frightened me even more, because nobody seemed surprised. It was as if they'd seen situations like mine before, too many times. Another investigator approached me. "Katie?" "Yes. We'd like to ask you a few additional questions." He led me a short distance away from everyone else. "I know this is difficult." I nodded. "I need you to think carefully. Okay? Has your stepfather ever entered your room without permission?" My first instinct was to say no. Then memories started surfacing. Tiny ones I'd ignored for years. "He used to knock," I said slowly, "but sometimes he'd already be opening the door." The investigator wrote something down. "Anything else?" I hesitated. "I don't know if it matters." "Tell me anyway." I stared at the ground. "When I was about 16, I started locking my bedroom door when I changed." "Why?" "I don't know." "Did something happen?" "No." I shook my head. I searched for the right words. "I remember feeling uncomfortable sometimes." He didn't interrupt. "He'd make comments." "What kind of comments?" I swallowed. "You're growing up fast. Better keep the boys away. You're breaking hearts already." I looked up quickly. I thought they were just embarrassing dad jokes. The investigator closed his notebook. "You're not the first person who said that." That sentence stayed with me. "You're not the first. Not the first." I wondered how many daughters had dismissed their instincts because someone told them they were overreacting. How many warning signs had been disguised as jokes. An hour later, the lead investigator walked toward my mom. "I need to speak with you privately." She followed him a few steps away. I couldn't hear everything, only fragments, electronic evidence, forensic examination, ongoing investigation. Then I saw my mother's shoulders collapse. She covered her mouth with both hands. She wasn't crying yet. She looked empty, as if every certainty she'd ever had been erased all at once. She slowly turned toward my stepdad. He took one step toward her. She took one step back. It was such a small movement. Most people would have missed it. I didn't, because that single step backward was the first time my mother had chosen distance instead of trust. An officer approached my stepdad. "Mark, we're leaving now." He nodded once. Then, for the first time since this nightmare began, he looked directly at me. There was no anger, no apology, no emotion at all. Just emptiness. Like I was a stranger. Maybe I always had been. As he walked toward the police vehicle, my mom suddenly called his name. He stopped. For one impossible second, I wondered if she was about to run into his arms. Instead, she asked only one question. Was any of it real? He looked at her for several long seconds. The evening wind was the only sound. Finally, he answered, "I loved this family. Not, I didn't do it. She's wrong. Not, I'm innocent. Just, I loved this family." Then he got into the vehicle, and they drove away. I stood there long after the taillights disappeared, because I realized something that still breaks my heart. Sometimes, the answer you never receive becomes the answer itself. Before I tell you how my life changed after that night, I want to ask you something. Do you think forgiveness is possible when the person who hurt you never truly admits what they did? Or does healing begin only when you stop waiting for the apology you'll probably never receive? At the time, I thought the hardest part was finally over. I had no idea that learning how to live with the truth would be even harder. People always ask me what happened after that, as if there were one clean ending, one final chapter, one moment where everything suddenly made sense. I wish life worked that way. It doesn't. Real endings happen slowly, sometimes so slowly that you don't realize you've already started a new life until months later. I never slept in that house again. Not one night. A week after the investigation began, I packed everything I owned into the back of my boyfriend's truck. It wasn't much. A few boxes of clothes, my childhood photo albums, some books, a stuffed rabbit I'd had since I was 5, and a framed picture of my little brothers. I stood in my empty bedroom one last time. The walls still had tiny marks where posters had once hung. The afternoon sunlight came through the same window. Everything looked exactly the way it always had. Except I didn't. For years, I'd believed this room held my happiest memories. Now I understood something painful. A place doesn't stop being beautiful just because something terrible happened there. But sometimes, you have to leave anyway. Not because the room changed, because you did. I quietly closed the bedroom door behind me, for the last time. The investigation continued for months. People often ask if I knew every detail of what the investigators found. I didn't, and eventually, I realized I didn't need to. There are some things you survive by knowing, and some things you survive by letting professionals handle. I stopped chasing every update. I stopped refreshing my phone. I stopped trying to build my future around a case I couldn't control. That decision gave me something I hadn't felt in a very long time: peace. The hardest part wasn't losing my stepdad, it was losing my mother. Not completely, but almost. She called often during those first few months. Sometimes she'd cry, sometimes she'd apologize, sometimes she'd say she wished she'd reacted differently that day in the coffee shop. One afternoon she said something I'll never forget. I keep replaying that conversation. So do I. I should have believed you immediately. I didn't answer, because she was right. There wasn't anything left to say. She continued quietly. I thought asking questions meant I was being fair. She paused. I didn't realize it felt like I was asking whether you were telling the truth. I closed my eyes. For the first time, I felt like she truly understood. Not what had happened, what it had done to me. There's a difference. People think healing begins with apologies. Sometimes it begins with understanding, even if that understanding comes too late. My little brothers didn't understand why I stopped coming home. They were too young. For months, I was simply busy, then working, then living closer to work. Children notice more than adults realize. My youngest brother hugged me one afternoon and whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" I cried the entire drive home. Trauma rarely hurts only the people involved. It spreads, quietly, into everyone who loves them. About a year later, my boyfriend proposed. It wasn't extravagant. No photographers, no expensive restaurant, no audience. Just the two of us sitting beside a small lake after dinner. He looked nervous. I laughed because I'd never seen him nervous before. Then he said something that mattered far more than the ring. "I can't change what happened to you." He took my hand. "But I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you always feel safe." Safe. Such a simple word. Before all of this, I would have thought safety meant locks on doors, security cameras, alarm systems. Now I knew better. Safety is a person who never makes you question your own reality, a person who believes your voice before they protect their comfort. I said yes before he even finished asking. My relationship with my mom is different now. Not gone, different. Some wounds become scars. Scars aren't the same as open injuries. They don't bleed anymore, but they remind you where you've been. We meet for coffee sometimes. We talk about work, about my brothers, about ordinary things. There are still long silences. There are still days when I look at her and remember sitting across from her in that coffee shop, waiting to hear 4 words. I believe you. Those words never came that day, and they never can. Time doesn't move backward. We only learn how to carry what's left. Every once in a while, someone asks me whether I hate my stepdad. The answer surprises people. No, I don't. Hatred keeps people living inside your mind. I spent too much time trying to escape that prison. I won't build another one for myself. What I feel is something quieter. distance, the kind that protects your peace. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that tiny black charger, not because I wonder what it recorded, because I remember what I believed before I found it. I believed bad things happened to other families. I believed trust, once earned, lasted forever. I believed home was always the safest place. I believed mothers always knew exactly what to do. Life has a way of taking our simplest beliefs and asking us to rebuild them from the ground up. It's painful, but strangely, it's also how we become stronger. If you've listened this far, I'd like to leave you with one question. Have you ever ignored your own instincts because trusting someone felt easier than facing the truth? I'd genuinely like to know your answer. Sometimes, reading other people's stories reminds us that we're far less alone than we think. And if this story stayed with you, or reminded you why listening to that quiet voice inside yourself matters, I'd be grateful if you subscribed and came back for the next one. There are thousands of stories on the internet, but the ones that change us are usually the ones that remind us to trust ourselves. I used to think the hidden camera destroyed my family. Now I know it didn't. The camera didn't create the truth. It simply revealed the truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. And as painful as that was, living with the truth has turned out to be far easier than living inside a lie.